So with our shrouds done, we now need to stain these pale natural coloured threads. So I'm using engine ink for this job, but you could use black paint, no problem at all, because it'll just soak in. Just make sure it's matte. We don't want to see any of this natural thread. When we come to put the thread the dead eyes, we'll have some natural thread that can be seen, but that's the only natural thread we want. Got to remember, on the actual ship, these would have been tarred because they wouldn't have been moving, and so they would have had protection on. So we need to make sure that they are nicely blackened. Just be careful not to flick it about onto your model. You'll be amazed how it can splash onto your deck if you're not careful. So no flicking with the brush, and then make sure it doesn't touch anything when it's drying as well. You might, if you're using engine ink, you might need to go and do it twice, because it will lighten in colour slightly when it dries. And don't forget to do both sides. So I'm now going to show you two different ways of attaching the rat lines, and you can then choose which way you want to do it. So first of all, I'm going to show you the correct method of doing the rat lines, which is what you will find on plan sheet 12, rigging plan 1. There is a little box there that shows you how it's done, but I'm going to show you with this test piece on larger thread so that it's a bit more clear what you're trying to do. So this is the rat line, this is the shroud, and your rat line should be coming across the front of the shroud like so, and wrap around the back of the shroud. That then forms a loop, and it comes over the top like so. That forms a cross, an X in front of your shroud, and a loop at the back. You're then going back behind the shroud again like so, and then your line is passing back over the front of the shroud but underneath the first line, so you get this sort of figure of 8, and then when you pull it tight you get a knot like so. That's the correct way of doing it. The problem I find with doing it this way, not only is it quite fiddly because you've got to work at the back of the shroud, you've got to work at the front of the shroud, you're passing through. I also find that quite often the thread doesn't hold. And these two loops that we had, if I just loosen this a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. These two loops that form this figure of 8, quite often it's difficult to get them to close up. And can you see how it's pulling the shroud? Well, that's pulling your shroud, and if that was attached to a previous shroud, it's pulling the shrouds all over the place. They take a lot of practice. You need to do it with the right thread, and to be honest with you, the thread that's provided in the kit, F17 is the one they want to use. I'll show you how that performs on here in a moment, and we'll do it with a small thread. So there is another way of doing it, and I think for beginners it's definitely the better way of doing it. Now obviously it's not accurate. If you want accurate, then you're going to do fiddly, and you're going to take your time, and you're going to get there in the end, but it will be time consuming and it will be fiddly. But there is an alternative way of doing it, and it's very similar but a bit less fiddly. So this is the method that may appeal to you as a beginner, and the end result is similar, but it's a little easier to do. So you're going straight across the top of the shroud, you're going round the back like so, which forms a loop, and then what I want you to do is go, trying to hold it straight for you, is drop the line down and then go up through the bottom of your loop. So you're forming a basic knot, and then as you pull that tight, you can position it on your line and all that sort of stuff. I'll show you that in a minute. You get something that looks very similar, but the knot tends to hold better, and you can adjust the position of it before you finally glue it. So yeah, now it's not right. That's your disadvantage. Most people looking at it, would they really know? Don't know. This is personal preference really, but it is an easier way, it is a quicker way, and you use less thread if you're concerned about that, but you shouldn't be. They'll have provided lots of thread. So let's see how the proper thread performs, and I'll show you a couple of different knots with the F17 thread. So the line that we've got here that I'm using as a shroud is actually shroud line. You can see how well this knot holds, can't you? I've used the shroud line for tying the knot just because I think it's easier for illustration. But if we use F17, which is the proper thread, I can show you what the two knots look like together and the ability of this thread to hold in place. So to do it properly, I'm going to go across. You're going to need tweezers, that's for sure. So you're going round the back of the shroud, going across the front, going behind the shroud, coming back up, and then passing through the loop you've made at the front. So you get this figure of 8. Like so. Or the simpler way, you're going across the line, underneath your loop, through, and pull tight. So that's your 2 knots. I'm going to zoom you in and do it again. But you can see from this distance, they don't look that much different. There is a difference. You've got a bigger knot. So let's have a look at it in close up and see what you think. Okay, hopefully the camera will focus. Yeah, seems to be focusing okay. Right, so let's show you once again the correct way of doing it. So your line, this is using the F17 line, so this is the correct line on the correct line for the shrouds. So your line goes across the front, goes round the back, like so. So you get a loop behind the shroud, you come across the front and then duck behind it, and then finally your line comes through this gap here. So you've gone across the front, round the back, across the front again, round the back, and then the line is tucking under this line here, like that, and you pull it tight. And what you want is to be able to adjust it up and down the line. Now you can see it will come undone, but it should hold for a moment. And that's the moment where you put a dab of glue on it. Now, let me show you the other way. So again, you're going across the front, making a loop, but this time rather than going behind the shroud, you're coming back up through that loop you've made around the shroud. So basic knot, pull it tight. And the advantage of that is this knot is it does not come undone, whereas you can see this one, now we've left it, has come undone. It's loosened off, and it can be a bit frustrating. So it will hold, but not for long. So you've got to have your glue there. You've got to be blobbing it with glue as you go. Whereas this, it'll hold. You can adjust it like you can the other one, and then when you're ready, when you've done your row and your row's in the right place, you can glue that into place. So that's 2 different ways. For me, they don't look very much different from a distance. That one is accurate, and if I get you a bit closer, you can see, you'll see that the actual difference is you've got a straight line across the shroud on this sort of cheats knot, and on this one you've got a cross. So that's the correct way of doing it. It can be problematic because it can undo, and it's definitely a bit more faffy. So yeah, that's your 2 knot options for me, at least. There might be different knot options, but those are the 2 I've used in the past. I'm not going to suggest that you should do either of those. You should make your own decision, but I'm giving you both options, and so you can think about it, and maybe use some of your offcuts, have a try, see if you can get your head around doing that one. Do a few practice runs before you start doing it actually on your shroud to start with. I find that this knot quite often is a good way of starting on the first shroud, but again, as you've seen, it's quite possible to do it on a standalone shroud. So yeah, the more difficult thing is not distorting your shrouds. So when you're tying your knots, you don't want to be pulling your shroud like that, because it causes problems. It is tricky. The first time I did shrouds and rat lines, I'd over tightened them, the shrouds were all being pulled in, and I had some rungs that were saggy and some rungs that were straight tight, and it didn't look great, but it was my first attempt and I accepted it as a learning, you know, and whilst it did detract from the aesthetic of the finished model, it was exactly what I expected, so it wasn't an issue. So there we go. That's my 2 different knots for tying shrouds. You can make a decision which one works best for you. I have seen in the past some people just put a blob of glue on and wrap the thread around. Very simply, just go across like that. Problem I have with that is it tends to want to undo, a bit like that one, but more severely. So I wouldn't recommend the wrap, but I have seen people do the wrap method, but not for me. Right, okay, let's get on with getting the rat lines on. I'm gonna try and film the rat lines being installed. It's going to be very, very, very difficult because the camera's going to want to focus on other things. But let's just talk about method. So I've shown you how to tie the knots for the rat lines. I've shown you that method. I've shown you a slightly less complex method. So the next question is, how do we get these correctly spaced, and do they need to be spaced exactly as per the plan? Well, the plan is a guide, so my view is you need to get it as close to the plan as you possibly can. You've got to assume that the plan is accurate, and therefore that's what you work with. So in this instance, you've got 33 rat lines that you need to add, and the gap between them is 6 millimeters. So that gap doesn't change at different heights. It doesn't become closer as you get to the top or anything. It's 6 millimeters all the way up. Every single one of these rat lines is spaced 6 millimeters apart from the previous lower one. So that's what you need to work out. Now, there's different methods of doing it. Some people cut the plan sheet out and pin it to the mast behind. Some people get a piece of paper and draw the lines on and put it behind the shrouds. Both of those are similar methods, and for me has never worked for a number of reasons. Firstly, it gets in the way. It's difficult to stop it sagging and falling and what have you. I mean, you could put it on card so it's more rigid, but you know, you've got to position it. It's a lot of faff. Plus, if you're drawing the lines, you've got to draw 33 lines, make sure they're correct and all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't work from that point of view for me. It's a lot of needless faff. The second thing is you've got to have these almost touching your lines to be able to know that you've accurately placed them. So you could put them all on, have them loose, and then put this behind and adjust them and glue them. But again, that seems like an extra activity, and why do that if you don't need to? So the paper or card behind the shrouds has never really worked for me. The other thing, of course, is you've got something there that's potentially in your way. So while you're trying to get behind it with threads, you've got this piece of paper and you could knock it. So then you've got to adjust it. It's just creating work. So the way I use, and it has worked for me. I mean, I started off doing the paper because that's what you saw other people to do, and you know, I think I was even instructed to do it in one of the part works. They quite often instruct that. What I've done is I've made a little strip of card. This is exactly 6 millimeters. So you can see, as I put it on there, it's exactly 6 millimeters, and whichever one I put it on, it's exactly the same. And what I will do is I will tie my rat line and then I'll use this to get it perfectly straight. So with my tweezers, I'll push my knots down so they're in a perfectly straight row. Then I can take this away, I can glue them. When I come to do the next rat line, I can actually thread this through the rat lines. So behind that one, in front of that one, behind that one, in front of that one, it'll sit there, and I can push the knots actually down to the card, take the card out, glue them into place. I find that quicker. So the only thing you've got to do is accurately cut 6mm. This is 6mm in length, in width accurately. So it's a piece of cardboard out of some packaging. It's fairly stiff, so it'll do the job. And we scored a straight line with the rule. Just cut it with an ordinary number 11 blade, and then I actually took the top and put it against the shroud line on the plan, like so, marked the position, did the same there, marked the position, drew a line between them, and then scored it. So I know this is perfectly straight because it's been cut against my perfectly straight steel rule. So I know that I'm pretty accurate. I mean, no one's going to know if it's off by a few thou, but I'm pretty sure this isn't. So that will do me all the way up, and for me that's an easier way of doing it, and definitely I think a quicker way of doing it. So give it a go, see what you think. But I mean, you could use a bit of strip wood as well. You could use a bit of strip off-cut plank if you wanted. You might have to glue a couple together and to get it to 6mm, but yeah, your gap is exactly 6mm. Now, if you're doing other models, that might be the plans show the gap at different lengths. Well, you just make a different strip of cardboard, but that's quicker than drawing all those lines on and then trying to pin it to your mast so that it's usable and you can get your head angle correct to line it up. I promise you, this is quicker. So there you go. That's how I'm going to go around making sure that my rat lines are straight and evenly spaced. So I'm gonna try filming it and we'll see what happens. So you might see me doing some rat lines next, or you might have me showing you some progression and what it looks like. So I thought it would be interesting to just talk through some of the common things that can go wrong when you're doing shrouds and rat lines. So we've got several things that are happening here, and I wanted to just talk you through them one at a time. So the first thing is our dead eyes should really be in a nice neat row if possible. It is a little difficult to do. The best way to solve that issue is when you're coming to tie the shrouds at the top, that you have the little bit of wire we've been using in each one of the eyes to balance it before you tie the shroud up at the top. So 2 pieces of wire can be helpful. If I turn this around and show you on this side, using the 2 pieces of wire here, we can keep the dead eyes fairly level, and we can keep those in while we tie the 2 lines together at the top, just below where they loop around the mast. So that's a good way of leveling them. If you find that one is slacker than the other, then possibly your line is a little bit too long, and you might want, if this one's slightly off, I'm going to leave it. But if it's, one's a lot looser, you might want to consider doing it again and getting your line right. And again, when you're getting the length right, using 2 bits of wire so that both your dead eyes are in the wire while you're getting the length right and wrapping it around the second one, that could be helpful as well. So that's the first thing, and probably the one thing that I see most of the time and was my biggest challenge when I first started doing these. So yeah, so you can see if you're not careful, you'll end up with these all over the place. You can see that one's lower than that one, but it's also lower than that one. So we could definitely retie that and make those a bit more level by using the 2 bits of wire. So the next thing that can go wrong is when you start tying your rat lines, that as you tighten them, you start to pinch the shrouds together. Can you see how they're pinching in? So if you look at this one, this is a telltale sign. You can see that's starting to face inwards, and that's because the line here and here is too tight. So this one is pulling this line in here, and then that is following suit because it's already been dictated by that. And so as you tie them, it pinches it together. So you just need to have your knots a little looser and keep your spacing apart to make sure that doesn't happen, you know. But the other thing is, if you tie the knot a little bit further up and then push it down, that will also pinch it together. So you want to be tying your knots and then pushing up is the solution for that, not pushing down. And those are the most common issues that you'll get when you're doing rat lines and shrouds. And it's quite easy to solve them. Just take a bit of time, take a bit of care, make sure your distances are good. One of the things that you can do to help with that is just use that little bit of card, make sure your distances are right. And that should give you nice square rigging all the way up. Okay, gonna show you how to thread the dead eyes. People get really worried about threading dead eyes, and they really don't need to. It's not as difficult as you might think. You start, sorry, I bumped the camera because it's right in front of my face. This is going to be a bit tricky for me, but you start by putting a knot in the end of your thread, and what I usually do is a double knot. So one knot that sits on top of the other, because with a thread this thin, there's quite a good possibility that you're going to pull the knot through the eye. So you know, that's one of those things you learn because it's happened. I'm going to do 3 knots because I didn't get that one particularly close. So we just, come on. You feel the pressure when you're filming, you know. Right, just managed to undo that one. Right, okay, let's get those knots to sit together. There we go. So that's our knot. So I'm going to just trim the end. I'll just trim the end right against the knot, and what I'm going to do is get a little blob of medium CA on the end of that knot, like that. Okay, so then we're going to cut a length that we think will do the job. When you've done the first one and you've got leftover thread, you'll be able to work out a little bit better what you need. Right, let's move that out of the way so we don't accidentally get glue on it, and then work out which is your first line. So I've got 2 of them put to one side, you can see are in the wires. So this one is my first one. So what we're going to do is we're going to thread the line through the eye on the bottom left. So I always have a look at the eye and see which one seems to be the front facing one, and I'm going to thread that line through the eye like so. Normally this would be right in front of my face, but it can't be because of you guys. So there we go. So the knot, obviously, sorry, I've just bumped the camera again, obviously goes in the back, so facing the deck. Yeah, so that when we come down, your line is at the front, not at the back. That means your line now has to go through the back and then be pulled forward. So what I'm doing now is I'm just putting my tweezers in and adjusting the position of the dead eye so that we've got one eye at the top, two at the bottom. And somewhere I've got my eye threader. Right, with our line through, it's coming down through the front and through the front of the back one and going up at the back. So we just get our line, pass it through the bottom eye. If you need to correct the position of your eye, do it before you're by putting your tweezers in and just manipulating it like that so it's lined up, but do that before you put your thread through. And then we carefully pull that through. Now the line needs to be coming out on the left hand side of the thread you've just put down, so that when you tighten it up the thread is going that way always, whichever eye you're doing. So we don't need to get it dead tight at this moment in time, we're just threading it through, and it's helpful to have it a bit loose because that means that you can move around your dead eye. So that now goes through the top eye, and I quite often find it easier just to use an eye needle threader. Like so, it's just quicker. It's really far away from me, this, because of where the camera has to be. So I'm struggling a little bit more than I would do. There we go. Right, just make sure we're not looped around anything like that cannon. Right, okay. So we seem to be a bit tangled here, and I don't know why. Let me just have a look at it. So while talking to you, I must have crossed my line. So it's really important that your line always stays over the left. So if you get it behind this line, it will get twisted. So you just simply have to undo it and do it again. But if you can avoid that, that's really helpful. So I'm just going to tighten it a little bit. There we go. So now we're going, my eyes moved. So now we're going through the top one, like that. Just feed it through. Grab that, and again keep it on the left, don't go through your loop or anything like that. And before you get it too tight, make sure that it's not going to get caught in your loop. Yeah, there we go. So that's 2 lines in. So we're nearly there. So now we're going through the last eye. going to need the needle threader again. I'm a little worried that this is looking more difficult than it actually is on camera because I'm so far away from it, whereas you can have this right in front of you when you're doing it. I'm about half an arm's length away, so right. So we keep that over onto that one side, like so, over to the left, and you can see that's gone through really nicely, and now it's going through the bottom hole like so, exactly the same as we've done before. So we're passing it right through the last hole from the front to the back. Come on. Oh gosh, so fiddly when you can't. I'm also to one side of it as well, so I've not got it straight in front of me. There we go. Much easier when you've got it right in front of you. Right, I can see the line, we're out of the back. Okay, so pull that right through at the back. Okay, now don't tighten it yet. What we're going to do now is we're going to come from the back over the top of the block. So can you see the little gap at the top? We're going to go through there. So I'm going to put my needle threader through like so. And we just pull that line through. So I'm just going to pull that through so you can see. There you go. So from the back, between the block and the lashing, you can see how that rope's coming through. So that's the start of us then tying it off. What we want to do now is just tighten everything up. So we start with the first line at the front. Just give it a little bit of a pull, and then pull it through from the back so that it becomes straight. And then with another pair of tweezers, you pull that back through and tighten the back one, and then find your line and pull that one tight. Find your line, pull that one tight, and then the last line at the back like that, and then you can pull that through at the front. So you might have to do it 2 or 3 times to get it as tight as you want it. So when you're happy that you've got it tight enough and it all looks good and right, like that, what we're going to do is we're now going to glue this so it doesn't move. So a little glob of medium CA, I'm just going to hold the line up like that so it's tight, and we're just going to glue it to the front there. Just give that a sec. There you go, that's already done. Now the process for tying it off you've already done before, but I'm going to show you again. So I've got quite a long length here, and it's a little bit unusable, so I'm going to just shorten it so it's a bit easier to handle. So we're going to go round the back, making a loop, pass it through the loop and pull that tight. You might have to just help tease it into place with your tweezers because it's going to catch on all the little lashings and stuff you've done. There we go. And then I'm going to do it a second time. Pull it tight. Spot of glue. And that is done. So give that a sec, then all you've got to do is cut it as close to the knot as you can, so it's nice and tidy, and that is all there is to it. Now, with that being quite far away from me, it's been a little bit more challenging to do than when I'm sort of up and close to it, so you won't find it as difficult as I did threading it through the eyes, but you get the general process. So do them in that order. So try and keep the ones that you're not using well out of the way, and then when you've done that, we're ready for the rat lines. And I'm going to show you some of the things that can go wrong with the rat lines and with doing this. So we'll talk about things that can go wrong now, and then we'll come back to trying to do it without things going wrong. Okay, my shrouds are now on. Before we do the rat lines, we've got a little bit of drilling we need to do. So this bit here, we're going to pass a line through, and what we need to do is make sure that we can pass the line through the bottom. So I've got a what is it? A 0.6 drill bit here, and we're just going to make sure that we've got an opening which allows us to put a thread through. Just tighten that. There we go. We can get a drill bit through it, we can get a line through it. So this is going to be our next job. We're going to be tackling plan sheet 18, rigging plan 7, and we're going to be doing the line that comes off the lower spar to this point here. Okay, so we are taking a line from this block to this point on the ship here. So it's a line that goes from here through the block, through that hole, and then ties off on the cleat on the inside. So first thing we've got to do is estimate how much line we need. So we start by saying we need that much for the cleat, we need that much to tie off on there, and then we're going to go from the cleat opening point to the block, and then from the block back down to the eye, and a little bit for good luck. And there we go. Now, it's probably easier to pass this through and tie it to the cleat first, and then pass the line through the block and then tie it off on the eye, because you've got easier access to that eye. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to tie off the cleat. Now, there is a diagram on plan sheet 8 that has a suggested method for tying off on the cleat, but as long as it looks nicely tied off, I wouldn't worry too much about which method you use. So we're going to start by actually passing the line through the hole that we've just drilled through. That shouldn't be a problem, it should go straight through. It hasn't done, so we're going to use our needle eye threader. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to pull the line through a little further, and I'm going to start. We're going to need 2 lots of tweezers for this, I think, and making sure that there's nothing under my elbow or anything sharp around. So I'm going to start by going to the furthest part of the cleat, like so, and then I'm going to put a little weight on just to counter us tying this cleat off. So you see what I did, we went to the furthest point and then looped it underneath that arm. I'm going to go across and then underneath the arm there, so we've got a cross. Then I'm going to wrap it around without going across the front of it, so just go around the back of it. Like so. There we go. And I'm now going to put a little clamp on that. If I can. I'll tell you what, I could use self-locking tweezers. There we go. Not behaving, is it? Can't grab it with these tweezers. There we go, got it through. There we go. That's tied off now. That should hold tight without a counterweight. We'll put a little bit of glue on the knot, and then we can go in and trim. Now, sometimes you just can't get in with my little scissors, so I use a material thread snipper, which has a longer reach, like that. Okay, so now we can go back to tying the line. Okay, so with that tied off, we can now just thread this line through our block. I'm going to use my eye threader, wherever it's gone, there it is. So we're going to go through this side, like so, and there we go. Now what we'll do now is thread it through that eye bolt, and then we'll put a weight on it, and we won't tie it off. We'll do the same again on the other side, and then just to make sure that we're not pulling on the spar and pulling it over to one side, and then we can make any adjustments before we knot it off and glue it down. So I don't need to do this, but because it's so far away so it can be on camera, it's just easier for me to use the needle threader. There we go. Careful of my swivel cannon there. And we don't want it caught up in that. There we go. So I'm just going to put a light weight on there, so I'm just going to use a little crocodile clip. And you can see that's going to hold taut now. It is pulling the spar around a little bit, but we can balance that on the other side and then tie them both off. So you've seen me do this one, so I'm going to do the other one off camera. So I have both sides threaded now, and you can see I'm using a crocodile clip on each one just to add a little bit of weight. That then allows me to adjust the spar and make sure it's straight. Then we can tie one of them off and glue that into place, and then we know that the other one's going to be tight when we undo it and then tie it off. So for the knot on this, you can just do a standard knot rather than trying to seize it. That'll be perfectly fine, and it'll look okay. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll try and do it on camera, and if it works out it does, then we'll stick it in, and if it doesn't work out so well and my fingers are in the way, then you probably won't see it. So let's have a go. So take the crocodile clip off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten this because I've got quite a long thread. We've overestimated it by a fair amount. So I'm just going to pull it tight with my tweezers, and with my other tweezers, this might still be a bit too long, thread it around the back there. Yeah, a bit too long still. Let me snip off a bit more. So the important thing is to make sure it gets tied tight. There you go. So I'm just going to tension it. Pull our knot tight. There we go, that looks good. And then I can lock that with a little spot of C8. And then I'm just going to go around and do another knot on top of it. What we've just done will hold, but sometimes doing a double knot just gives you a feeling that it's been lashed or something, rather than just seeing a small lump of a knot, or at least that is my view. There we go. For me, that just looks a little bit more nautical somehow, even though it's not. Okay, give that a sec, and then we can trim that, and that's that side done. And then do exactly the same on the other side, which you don't need to see.